Most documentaries and journalistic articles focus on the artistic counterfeiting, that is, the fake replicas of popular products such as Nike shoes. In reality, your average run-of-the-mill counterfeit Nike shoe is actually real, straight from the Nike factories in China. The methods they use to actually acquire the shoes and clone the shoes and then distribute the shoes are surprising and not what the media makes them out to be. So, here's the truth. To understand counterfeit shoes, first you need to understand why they exist in the first place and the system that helped create them. Counterfeit products have been around for decades, and counterfeit shoes have been around just as long, since the 70s, in fact. But the early fakes were at least honest about being fake. USA Olympics, not to be confused with a quarterly international sporting event, was an in-house brand owned by then major retailer JCPenney. Most young people today have never heard of them, but back in the day they were notorious for design imposterism. Adidas shoes were all the rage during the 80s. Everyone wanted apparel bearing the iconic 3 stripes, and they were willing to pay almost any price. So, under their Olympic brand, JCPenney boldly released a pair of sneakers with the iconic 3 stripes marked on the sides. With a less brand power and cheaper materials, JCPenney was able to undercut Adidas by selling their shoes for much less money to shoppers who couldn't afford the real thing. JCPenney wasn't a designer brand, but they could make similar-looking shoes for customers for a pair of Adidas. Since many other brands have taken a similar approach, we call them knockoffs, knockoff cereal, knockoff iPads, which are compared to their name brand equivalent. The late 90s and early 2000s saw a big push towards something even more vulnerable to being knocked off by lowly brands and counterfeit manufacturers: collectible sneakers. Nike started releasing limited edition versions of their flagship shoe, the Air Jordan, and created a whole new industry for counterfeiters. eBay had just launched, and creative counterfeit merchandisers were flooding the online marketplace with fakes. Fake Air Max 95s, fake Retro 4s, and many fake Jordan 11s. Some counterfeit creators didn't even bother reproducing accurate replicas of the real shoes. They made lookalikes with different color combinations that Nike had never released, confusing sneaker collectors. Even famous sneakerheads were caught wearing miscolored fakes made outside the Nike factory. It was a chaotic time for shoe collectors. No one was sure what was fake and what was real, not even famous people who are supposed to be smarter than us. As time went on, the confusion only got worse. YouTubers in the late 2000s and early 2010s started posting videos of early release pairs of shoes that were, in reality, just really well-made fakes. To make matters worse, companies like Nike hired these content creators as influencers. These videos only confused consumers even more than they already were. Sneaker collectors, known culturally as sneakerheads, didn't know what to believe anymore. It wasn't common to go in completely blind when buying sneakers outside of mainstream retail marketplaces like Foot Locker or official Nike stores, where the authenticity of the sneaker is absolutely guaranteed, versus online merchants on eBay and specialty websites that sold sneakers exclusively. Despite not knowing if the shoes they were buying were fake or not, sneakerheads continued purchasing from unauthorized websites. Why? The answer is found in what helps drive sneaker collecting: competition. Sneakerheads are a competitive bunch. They're also skeptical. With that combination, the online sneaker resale market is heaven for them. In the 2000s, sneaker collecting became more than just a fun hobby. It was serious business. Other sneakerheads' opinions mattered more, and your ability to acquire the right shoes at the right time was everything. Sneakerheads also began losing trust in the brands they bought from around this time, even brands as powerful as Nike. They were clearly supporting influencers who openly flaunted pairs of counterfeit shoes, something that brands should have opposed. These actions made Nike and Adidas, amongst many other brands, appear inauthentic. And for sneakerheads, authenticity and honesty are everything. At the same time, sneaker collections wanted to appear authentic themselves. And in modern times, another meaning for authenticity is being better than everyone else. For a sneakerhead, it's about being better than other sneakerheads. It's about getting the latest, most expensive release before anyone else, then posting about it on Instagram, YouTube, TikTok. Getting the shoes first became a status symbol, almost as important as owning the shoes themselves. Fame also played a significant role. The quicker you could get the latest releases, the more attention you could get from other collectors. Online resellers were also a bit cheaper than retailers, and not all sneakerheads have a golden fountain to draw from. They're regular people with regular jobs. So, for the collectors trying to get famous, suspicious online retailers were a more affordable option for building a sneaker influencer brand. We'll go into more details later on how the system works, but for now, understand that these shoes are going through many hands, some not even aware they're handing off fakes to their customers. At the system's source, however, there are the people who actually either obtain or manufacture the sneakers. That's where the luxury sneaker market is formed. These counterfeit sellers are the cliché that most people picture. The group of scrappy but clever forgers carefully constructing poorly made fakes in a dingy basement. But that image is as false as the notion that all counterfeit Nike shoes are made in a dingy basement, or that counterfeit sneakers are poor imitations of the ones made in legitimate Nike factories. In reality, counterfeit sneakers are almost as mainstream as Nike itself, and their quality is sometimes identical to the shoes you'd find in an authorized Nike store at your local outdoor mall. Sneakerheads are divided up into two groups: those who care about buying fakes and those who do not. The collectors who don't care have good reason not to care. Many of the high-quality fakes are almost exact replicas of the real shoes. In other words, they're only fake in that they weren't made in a factory in China for Nike. These homemade replicas, the good ones at least, are almost impossible to tell apart from the legit shoes made by Nike. If you're a sneaker collector buying online from an unauthorized dealer, you'll have to have your sneakers inspected by an expert to know if your shoes are legit or not. The individuals who make them are more professional and streamlined than that. They operate more like a secret company than a cartel or criminal organization. The New York Times interviewed a sneaker forger and learned the methods they use to make near-perfect copies of the real ones. The most common method, according to the forger, is to simply buy a pair of sneakers from the store and make a copy. The informant, who went by the name Lynn, described the process. First, you get a pair of shoes. Then you carefully take the shoes apart, paying close attention to how the different parts are stitched and molded together. After deconstructing the shoe, Lynn says they would draw up their own design. From the designs, he would buy the exact same or similar materials than the original shoes are made of, then assemble the fakes as effectively as possible. Lynn claims he and their crew produced 3,000 Nike counterfeit sneakers just from one pair of authentic shoes. In the early days, Lynn says they had people working for them on the inside of the Nike factories, that is. Lynn revealed that he was bribing the factory workers for information and, of course, access to shoes. This information included blueprints to the sneaker they were trying to clone. But most of all, Lynn wanted shoes. Some shoes were even tossed over the factory walls to Lynn's employees. His employees then bring him the shoes from Puyang, China, the city where Nike manufactures their products, to his factory there in the same city. Nike counterfeits from Puyang eventually developed a reputation for having high-quality fakes, partly because they actually used the same materials which were readily available in the Nike factories and the shoe design blueprints. Those helped with perfecting the appearance and structure of the shoe. Lynn's counterfeit shoes were almost identical to the ones manufactured at the Nike factories. They were so hard to tell apart that sometimes the fakes would end up in stores weeks before the real shoes showed up. The only downside for sneaker replicators is the tediousness. It takes time to make shoes, and even more time making sure a shoe is the exact same as the one made by Nike. It's much easier to acquire shoes already assembled. There's no manufacturing process, just a straightforward trade between businesses to a blissfully unaware consumer, with plenty of middlemen in between who rarely, if ever, disclose the legitimacy of their products. For that reason, many counterfeit suppliers and sellers choose to go the factory route instead of DIYing it. It's also surprisingly easy to get shoes straight from the factory or during pre-release, and cheaper. Though it is difficult to get them in high volumes due to increased security and the fact that Nike would eventually notice if a bunch of their shoes went missing. Buying the high-quality materials used on legit Nike sneakers were quite expensive. In some cases, it drove the prices up and kept forgers like Lin from creating a feeding frenzy situation where collectors swarm in to get shoes below retail price. But even shoe cloners like Lin strive for high-quality fakes, because if you're going to lie to customers, you might as well do it well. After all, the easier it is to get the fakes past inspectors and experts, the easier it is to sell them. Of course, Lin wasn't the only crafty entrepreneur to take advantage of the crazy high demand for collectible sneakers. James Peppion is one such businessman. Instead of capitalizing on the manufacturing of counterfeit shoes, Peppion focused his business on the distribution side of the industry through his now defunct company, Supplied PDX. In the mid-2010s, Supplied PDX was a major online shoe seller. They had the latest Air Jordans before some of the authorized dealers could even put them on the shelves. Naturally, Peppion's too-good-to-be-true business got the attention of federal investigators, specifically Homeland Security and the good old IRS. Nike had already conducted an investigation of their own into Supplied PDX. They found the company was deliberately and openly selling shoes that Nike themselves hadn't even released. Needless to say, they were concerned. Agents were too, and handed Google a stern search warrant to sift through any emails that might link Peppion's company to a source in China. Sure enough, they traced an email from a Chinese national. They investigated the Chinese national and found that he was already suspected by authorities of stealing from Nike factories in China. After digging a little deeper, investigators found that the man was collecting stolen samples of Air Jordan and Nike sneakers from Chinese factories. Then, on top of that, was directly organizing the transportation of the counterfeit sneakers to Supplied PDX. To clarify, the Chinese national in question was also exporting cloned shoes as well as sneakers straight from the factory. You could say he had an eclectic style. Supplied PDX was eventually shut down, and Nike earned themselves a major victory against the legions of counterfeit sneaker producers. The shoes he was sending to Supplied PDX weren't all straight from the factories. Some of them were carefully crafted copies, almost exactly like the real ones. Even though they weren't shoes made in the authorized factory, they were almost the same pairs of sneakers as ones from said factories. The only difference was Nike wasn't making money from their online sales. It was design theft. Theft Nike couldn't stop, no matter how hard they tried. It's impossible to stop ambitious sneaker enthusiasts from finding a pair, then replicating it, then selling it to an unsuspecting online merchant who sells the shoes to another online merchant who sells the pair to someone on eBay. This system has become its very own market, unique from the authorized sneaker market or even the online retail market as a whole. And its complicated and often secretive trade system results in an even more confusing marketplace, even more confusing than it was in the late 90s and 2000s. Everyone from Lin to James Peppion are mere components of the infamous and controversial grey market. The grey market is, well, grey. It's not black or white, it's not just counterfeit shoes, clone shoes, or authentic shoes, it's everything and then some. No one's sure what they're buying in this so-called grey market. They just know they're getting the collectible sneakers they want for an affordable price, and very few, if anyone, at all can tell the difference. For that reason, some collectors argue that the shoes in the grey market are the same ones as Nike sells, different only in that Nike doesn't manufacture them at their factories. In other words, if you buy a pair of shoes on the grey market, it's no different than buying them from the authorized Nike store. It's the same materials, the same blueprints, and the same style. Other collectors think the opposite. They think the grey market is inauthentic and shopping with authorized dealers is the only legitimate way to collect sneakers. Regardless of which side you're on, the grey market shows that counterfeit sneakers aren't as fake as you might think. Which brings us to the resale market, the system that fuels the grey market. Even though we know how the market became what it is today, understanding how massive the collectible sneaker market is helps put the bizarre things you've heard into perspective. There's no way to know exactly how big the market is numbers-wise, but the sneaker market has a solid estimation that gives you an idea of what Nike and its collectors are dealing with. Nike usually earns tens of billions of dollars from their footwear alone. One year they made a staggering $29 billion. And in 2022, revenue from Air Jordans hit an all-time high of $5 billion, with plenty of room to grow, according to analysts. As for the resale market, the same analysts at Cohen Investment Bank predict the resale market will reach $30 billion per year from its latest estimate at $5 billion. Mathematically speaking, the Nike and Air Jordan resale market earns the same annually as Nike does in retail sales. And these are the resale revenues we know about. It's also hard to know if the estimates are counting or are even able to count the other transactions between the fake manufacturers and the retailers. Out of all the companies and sneaker resellers, StockX exemplifies how big and morally complicated the grey market and the resale market really are. In the recent past, StockX has been valued at roughly $3.8 billion. With that high of a valuation, they are one of the biggest shoe resellers on the planet. Of course, they don't just sell sneakers. They also run a media division that provides sneakerheads with the latest and most relevant news on the luxury sneaker market. Both arms of the company create a win-win for, you guessed it, the company itself. StockX's large media following allows them to use free advertising for their sneakers, which helps them make a lot of money. The sneakers they sell are all resold. They get very few straight from the Nike factory, meaning that in some cases they have no idea where the shoe's been or where it came from. In a major effort to crack down on the constant patent and design infringement, Nike is suing StockX for selling counterfeit sneakers. The suit was originally about NFTs, but Nike switched the focus to counterfeit sneakers, apparently after investigating the company's products. However, the odds of a complete victory are slim. Nike has always had a tough time cracking down on IP infringement. They lost a lawsuit against Xiaodan Sports in China. Nike caught Xiaodan clearly stealing their designs and putting them on their products. To be clear, StockX is no Xiaodan. Most of StockX's shoes are fully authenticated by their staff, though they admit there is a possibility some counterfeits slip through the cracks every now and then. Unfortunately, there's no concrete evidence that StockX sells counterfeit sneakers. Only Nike's specimens they found in their investigation, which have yet to be verified by a third-party expert. And one could easily argue that the fakes that slip through are probably so similar in quality to the real shoes that they're barely even counterfeits, only by technicality. The lawsuit against StockX isn't looking great for Nike. They're fighting back, claiming that Nike's suit is baseless. They even cited times when Nike publicly expressed their support for StockX, praising their authenticity. This led many to theorize that Nike is filing this suit to take a swing at the resale market. The resale market allows Nike products to earn more money after their initial retail purchase, money that widely misses the pockets of Nike. But despite the lawsuit, the resale market doesn't have much to fear. It's safe to say that if companies like StockX can survive Nike, then the small army of other resale companies will too. And the anarchy surrounding real versus fake Nike sneakers will continue for the foreseeable future. Click to watch one of these next videos. Let us know in the comment section what you think is the most iconic sneaker in history.